We're here at the iHeart radio station. My name is Scout Braun, sophomore at Lafayette High School, and today I'm with the Badgers play-by-play announcer, as well as the most recent inductee to the Wisconsin Announcers Hall of Fame, Matt Lepay. Thank you for joining me today,
Good to be
Matt.
with you. Good to be with you.
So my first question out of the gate is, obviously you can see me. I'm 15 and I'm pretty young into the whole field of journalism and sports broadcasting. When did you gain your spark when you were growing up for sports?
Probably about your age, if not a couple of years sooner than that, to be honest. I think, like a lot of boys and girls growing up, you want to be a Major League Baseball player or play in the NFL or the NBA. I was pretty realistic about my talents or lack thereof. Coaching was something I thought about for a little bit, but I fell in love with the business just growing up, either watching games on television or listening to radio broadcasters. I thought, man, that'd be a great way to make a living. You're going to games, and it was something I probably caught the bug. I may have been at the latest 15, but it might have been maybe 12 or 13 years old. I thought this is something that'd be pretty cool to do.
Yeah, when I was doing research preparing for this interview, I read that you started as a high school broadcaster for your high school.
I did. When I was done with college, I grew up in Ohio. Went to Ohio State. Sorry.
Yeah.
But in terms of actually getting paid, and it wasn't much.
Yeah.
It was calling high school games, high school football, high school basketball, some American Legion baseball games, which was a lot of fun. And that was the good part. The not so good part was I had to play beautiful music, what they called the beautiful music of yesteryear. That was awful. It was elevator music. That was 8 hours a day.
Yeah, I read that
yes,
as well.
Yes, but the payoff of doing all of that was being able to broadcast games. That the more you can do, then you can knock the rust off and start to get your own skill set established. And those were really, I was only at the place for a couple of seasons, but it was really important chapter for me, is just being able to call as many games as I could.
Building the foundation.
Absolutely. Building a foundation, developing your own style, getting a resume. At the time, resume tape. You have to ask your uncle what a cassette tape was.
Well, no, I know what a cassette tape is.
Yeah, you do. Good for you.
Yeah.
Good for you.
Yeah, because that was another part that I was reading about while I was doing research for this interview, that's kind of how you got your start with the Badgers. You sent in some tapes because you've seen something in the magazine?
I did, yep. An old magazine that's no longer in existence. They were looking for a basketball play-by-play announcer and a backup hockey announcer. So I did a little hockey when I was in college, not particularly well, but okay. But the main job was as a basketball announcer and an afternoon drive sports anchor. So the high school basketball was really important. I was able to put together what I thought was, the best work that I have done. You put some highlights together, and then you do a longer stretch of just game action, and send them the tape. And I was one of probably 150 or so, but I was the lucky one. So that was the one who they liked, and we flew up for an interview, and the rest is history.
So when you got your first, when you got it started, what do you think was the toughest challenge or the biggest roadblock that you hit throughout those first couple of years?
I think when you move, particularly in my case, growing up in Southwest Ohio and then moving up here, is just getting familiar with the landscape here in Madison, Wisconsin, and what the Wisconsin sports fan was all about, learning the history of Wisconsin basketball as well as Wisconsin football. I knew a little bit because it's a Big Ten school, but there was far more I didn't know than what I did know. So you want to try, when you come into a market, you want to make yourself part of the community as fast as you can. It's never fast enough, right? When you move, you want to know everything today. But that takes a little time, getting the right pronunciation of all the towns in Wisconsin, which at first can be a little bit intimidating. But it's like that with every state. Ohio is the same way, and I'm sure Indiana and Illinois, so on and so forth.
All the Midwest.
All of the Midwest, indeed. But that was probably, and that was, when you move up here to the upper Midwest, you're hoping, can I handle these winters? And all, but that was more of a minor detail. But just getting used to the culture and everything that's involved in this state.
So switching more to like obviously current day and like the actual like broadcasting, like I've always been interested, like how much time do you spend pregame working on stuff? That could be a spotting board, it could be
Mhm.
watching film. Like how much time do you spend on that?
I don't count the hours, but I would say it's
Mhm.
many,
Many.
particularly
Mhm.
with football because of the roster
Yeah.
sizes. And I put together the spotting board, and I do it old school. There are, ways you could do it now, but I still.
I feel like every announcer or broadcaster has their own way of doing their
Yep.
spotting boards.
Yep, and you do whatever works.
Mhm.
Mine is handwritten. I have the felt, the pen.
Mhm.
Do different colors, but I try to put everybody on there who plays,
Mhm.
not just first string, second string. You want to have just in case, and then you try to commit for radio. You try to commit the names and numbers to memory, almost like a flashcard.
Yeah.
44 is John Smith,
Mhm.
22 is Mike Johnson, so on and so forth. What I try to do, my goal for every game, football or basketball, and especially football, is to get the roster in my head like game day, where I don't really have to look at my spotter board very much. Now I could double check if there's a statistic that I have written down or some little anecdote about the player, just to make sure I'm right. But I try to look at that as little as possible, because the game is going on and you have substitutions after every play. And now with Wisconsin football, those guys play at a little faster pace than what they have under
Yeah.
previous coaches. So you got to be ready. And I have a lot of live commercial reads that I have to get in during the course of a broadcast. So on game day, that spotter board is more of a cheat sheet. But during the week, I'm looking at it all the time. I'm looking at recent games of the opponent that Wisconsin is playing that week, and that, just when you visualize it, it's one thing to just look at a board and memorize names and numbers. It's much more efficient or effective for me if I can actually see that team play. And then you get used to, okay, this formation probably leads to this kind of play, and you're just more familiar with the personnel that way.
Yeah. So back to like talking about like broadcasters and all that and radio guys, who are some of your favorite modern day guys to listen to or even take inspiration from?
In my case, it's a couple guys I've gotten to know reasonably well over the years. Kevin Harlan is one of them.
I have that down as a note right now.
Yeah, for both radio and television. His radio is incredible.
He's one of my favorites.
Yeah.
Growing up as well.
And the key to Wayne Larrabee is a friend of mine, and we do a podcast together a couple times a month. He's another one, and the trick in all of this is, though, and I had to learn this over time, you could have, if it's 2, if it's 4 or 5, try to take a technique that they use and incorporate it into your style. Don't try to be the next Kevin Harlan or the next Wayne Larrabee or the next Gus Johnson or Ian Eagle, whoever. But if there's something there that I kind of like how he does that, and then you want to be you want to be scout. But with Kevin and Wayne in particular, what I like about them is their expanded vocabulary. It's they've got a wide range of words that they incorporate for verbs. Kevin's like that. Really noticed it with basketball.
Yeah,
on the
like
radio.
those. That's why I think I like, as such a young like person, I loved him, because there's like and that's why I was a big fan of you and Wayne. It's like you guys use these words where it's like, I don't even know what that means, but it sounds cool.
Well, you want to just find, like, for instance, in basketball, different ways instead of saying Smith throws a Johnson.
Yeah.
You want to bounces, feeds, chest pass, one hand pass. That kind of.
Yeah.
You incorporate different words, and it brings it to life, I think, more so. I mean, the radio broadcast and the television broadcast there are similarities, but there are noticeable differences too in how you present it. But on the radio side, you want to bring it to life. The best compliment I think that we can get on the radio side is if a listener is telling you that that we make them feel like they're there. They are right there in the midst of the action. That tells us that we're doing our job. But you can do all of that stuff, but the important thing is to get the basics down. Score and time. Where's the ball? Because when people when you're applying for jobs, it's such a subjective business that styles can vary, and that's the beauty of this industry, is there are 101 different ways to present the game, but you still have to get the facts in there. You know, what's the score, what's the time, baseball, what inning, what's the score, what's the count. If you don't do that, then the other stuff kind of
All the
loses
other
its
antics,
effectiveness.
yeah.
Yes.
So switching over to Badger athletics now, what were your overall takeaways from the basketball season, and what do you think that the future looks like?
It was up and down. It was inconsistent, but at their best, they proved they could be among the best in the country. You know, beating Purdue in the Big Ten tournament, playing them really well in 2 other games prior to that. The problem was defensively they weren't as good as they normally are.
Which is uncharacteristic for a
Very
Badgers
much so.
team.
Very much so. I mean, they weren't horrible, but they were nowhere close to
So
their
they weren't
normal
like
standard.
the usual Big Ten
Yes.
Badgers defense, which is usually the reason why they would get into the tournaments.
Correct. Offensively, they scored more than they've scored per game in 30 years, but they were still, as a shooting team, they were a little bit up and down. And when you're not great defensively, you need to sustain it. Like Illinois, defensively, statistically, was worse than Wisconsin, considerably worse, but they could score consistently well. Terrence Shannon was a difference maker, and Marcus Damask and the whole group.
Yeah, Damask is someone who, he have an Illinois fan right here. I was always telling him Damask is the X factor for that team. Because Shannon can go get you 20, 25, but Damask is going to get you 15, 5, and 5 and play defense on the best player.
No, he really, I mean, to his credit, he really developed into a terrific college player.
Yeah,
he
exactly.
was a really good fit for what they were doing. So I do think that Wisconsin's as we record this, the roster is in some flux right now, the transfer portal, but they have 2 really good freshmen, one in particular in Daniel Freitag, but Jack Robinson I think could be really good for them as well. You know, they're going to add a dimension. You got Max Klesman, you got Chucky, you got a pretty good core coming back. So and the way they're evolving and what they're doing offensively, I think they're in a pretty good place to continue. They score almost 75 a game this season. I'd like to think they could bring that up even more coming up next year.
Yeah, you just gotta think that they'll figure out a way to replace, unfortunately, AJ Storr, who is the dynamite to the Badgers offense.
Yeah, it's the nature of where we are in college athletics now. You're going to lose a few, and some maybe like with AJ that was not unexpected.
After you have that big of a jump from when he was at St. John's, where he wasn't really doing a ton, then you go to Wisconsin and you prove on some of the biggest stages that you're one of the best. You can be one of the best players in the country.
Yeah, and he's I still think that the most exciting thing about him is he can still get a lot better. Better defensively, still be more fundamentally sound offensively. Shot selection, playing off 2
Shot
feet.
selection is the big one.
But I mean, anybody who watched him play, it's different. He can do some things that we don't see all that often here in Wisconsin. But that's to my point. That's the nature of the beast. You look around college basketball. There are a lot of really good players who have, for whatever reason, gone into the portal. And with NIL, school A, you can make a certain amount. School B, maybe twice that. Who knows? But I don't think Wisconsin's a team that's going to want to have massive transfer portal turnover year in and year out, but you get 1 or 2, maybe 3 if you really need it. I don't know if they would need to get that many this year, maybe, we'll see. But you still want your core to be guys who have developed within the program. I think it's served Wisconsin well.
Yeah. So now, still talking about Badgers basketball, obviously Greg Gard was the big, are they going to keep him? Are they not going to keep him? I feel like that happens every year with Wisconsin basketball. What do you think their ceiling is with Greg Gard as a coach?
Well, I think they're a team that can certainly make a deep run. We've seen 2 Big Ten championships. We've seen a couple of Sweet 16s. And I think the thing that people do forget, when he took over for Bo Ryan, who is a Naismith Hall of Famer, which means he's one of the best to ever do it. But the team that Greg ended up taking over was spinning its wheels. It wasn't playing particularly well at the time when Greg took over, and then they got right, and they got to the Sweet 16 that year, got to the Sweet 16 the next year, and were it not for a buzzer-beating 3, a heartbreaker, they would have, who knows, maybe they win the next game against South Carolina and go to the Final Four. So I do think Particularly now with the way they're evolving offensively.
Yeah.
That gives them the chance to bring in more gifted players who are going to enjoy this system and know they can flourish. So with a guy like him, I certainly think that a Final Four is not an outrageous thought.
Yeah.
With him, because he's proven, and I think what people hear, every fan bases always get very, the patience runs short.
Yeah.
But I think Greg has a respect within the coaching community, within the college basketball world, that maybe some folks around here would, maybe the naysayers would be surprised to hear it. But he is a very, very respected basketball coach.
I feel like it could be almost similar to how Matt Painter at Purdue, kind of how they were losing to these extremely high seeds the past couple of years, and now they're in the national championship at UConn.
Yeah, it is it's an interesting dynamic. Basketball kind of does this to it does do this to itself, because there is such focus on March.
Mm-hmm.
Those who are watching college basketball from November, December, January, February, they've known that Purdue's been really good for a long time.
Purdue.
But you get a lot more eyeballs in the month of March, and if you have a bad 5-minute stretch or a bad 2 or 3 minute
Or you
stretch in
just
a
get
game,
a bad matchup.
yeah, and you're done. And it's a single elimination. It's not like a best of 5 or a best of 7 where you can make tactical adjustments from game 1 to game 2 like you see in the NBA.
Mm-hmm.
You have a bad day and you're done.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of us in the Big Ten are really happy for Purdue, because we've known how good that program is and how good of a coach Matt Painter is. And now it's like everybody else sees it too. I mean, Zach Edey he's very different.
Yeah.
But there are a lot of other really good players on that team.
Yeah, both their guards are extremely, like Braden Smith, he was dealing with a little turnover issue against NC State, but he's one of the best guards in the Big Ten. He was first team All Big Ten for a reason.
Yeah, Lance Jones
is a great shooter. That dude has, like, every Badger game, like, oh, he's shooting it from there. Oh, he made it.
Yeah. So no, it's been you are judged in March, and it's not necessarily fair, but it's the world that these coaches and everybody involved has signed up for. But again, I just go back to people within the game know how good Matt Painter is. They consider him one of the best out there, and Greg's got a lot of respect too across the country.
Yeah. Now switching over to football, what do you think the outlook for Badger football should be looking like this?
The schedule, I don't know if I've ever seen one quite like this before.
Especially.
With Alabama coming here, and then, USC, the first Big Ten game this fall.
The new Big Ten expansion.
Yes, Oregon comes here, Penn State comes here. It's a pretty daunting schedule. In some ways, I think they could be better than they were a year ago, but that doesn't guarantee that the record's going to reflect it because of the difficulty of it. I do think, as we chat here in the month of April, that they are bringing in the kind of players that they're looking for, a little bit more length, maybe a little bit more of an edge to them, particularly with the linebackers they brought in and via the transfer portal. But I think it's going to take time. One of the things that I've thought about since the end of the season, in retrospect, we probably shouldn't have been surprised that they were 7-6, because it's been a little bit of a struggle. Not awful by any means, but a little bit of a struggle by their high standards the last few years. And just to think that the next coach is going to wave a magic wand, and all of a sudden a 7 or 8 win team becomes a 12 win team. That's probably not realistic. So, I think it's going to take time, but I'm thinking they're heading in the right direction by bringing in the kind of players who they think are the best fits here.
I think, as well as it being year 2 of Luke Fickell and him getting his first year with all of his guys from the portal, or it could be recruiting. Yeah, I think it's that, and the returning players too have an understanding. This time last year, it was like, what's this going to be like? Are we going to be like Cincinnati, or are we going to be like how we were with?
Well, I guess my point is the players on the team, because of how they go through their conditioning, their weightlifting, their off-season program, it's different. Intensity level, every strength coach has a different method, Brady Collins and his staff probably view things differently than the previous staff. And the tempo of practices but the returning players now, okay, we know what to expect. So some of that, I don't know if fear is probably not the right word, but just the unknown.
Yeah, the unknown.
Now they know, and I think if anything, I've been of the opinion that Luke is doubling down on his philosophy. This is how it's going to be. This is the intensity that we are going to require every day. If it's the weight room, if it, obviously on the practice field, everything you do is a competition. So now the returning players know it, and the new players find out rather quickly what it's about.
Yeah, and especially with the Badgers, it's like now I think they'll have a sense of like what is going on. Necessarily compared to last year, it was like so many unknowns at every position. Now, to be fair, there is still unknowns at a couple positions. Braylon Allen going to the draft obviously is going to hurt, and then your quarterback situation, you're like, is it going to be this guy? Is it going to be this guy? We don't know yet, obviously, because we're in April as we're talking about this.
Yeah, that's the great point. It is April, and you get an idea. Coaches get an idea. Okay, what can we throw at these guys? What are they going to grasp? What are they going to understand, and be able to react and not think before every play? But yeah, the receiving core, we didn't know much about Will Pauling this time last year. Well, he had one of the better years we've ever seen from a receiver in Wisconsin.
Yeah.
Bryson Green, if he stayed healthy.
Most of these guys extremely underrated nationally, but
which is okay. That's fine. But I want to see the growth of those guys. C.J. Williams, what can he do? They got Tyrell Henry, the transfer from Michigan State. I think he could be a pretty valuable addition to the receiving core. And then, with the quarterback spot with Tyler Van Dyke coming up here from Miami.
Who was a very solid quarterback at Miami until, injuries and then
coaching changes. He's played he can go through, he's gone through what a lot of the Wisconsin players have gone through where the position coach changes. And that's hard.
And
it's something that I think a lot of folks will overlook, but that's real. Each position coach has his own philosophy and just certain things that he looks for. And I think with Tyler, I know he got banged up a lot. The people I know who covered him in the ACC say he's a really tough kid. He went through a really difficult stretch. But at the same time, I don't know if they're just handing him the job either. Braden Locke started 3 games last year, and he's somebody who has a real presence about him. And it kind of goes back to what we talked about a couple of minutes ago, just competition. They just want to create as much as they can. Quarterback spot gets the most attention. But running back room, I think is going to have some depth. Ches Malusi coming back is really important for this team. Tawee Walker, transfer from Oklahoma, he's a burly dude, and they've got some pretty intriguing freshmen coming in too. So, they're not going to get everything answered in the spring, but they can get at least a decent idea of who they think they can continue to count on when they start fall practice in August.
Yeah. I think they will for sure be in a better spot than they were last year coming out of the spring, because the spring game you were like, okay, we gained about nothing. we knew some guys are still good, but then it was like,
Yeah, spring games you got to be careful because they're a practice.
Yeah, exactly.
They're going to practice.
It's a scrimmage. It's a practice scrimmage.
They will have, it's just the one that people tend to watch.
Exactly.
Right? But they get it is a day, one of many where they're being evaluated. So that's always the thing you try to warn fans, don't take too much out of this. If somebody lights it up, that's great. But if someone stinks it up, don't think that's the end of the world either. It is a day, and a lot of times in these practices too. Coaches don't talk about it a lot publicly, but they can tilt things and like, okay, today we're gonna have the defense really test the offense. We're gonna blitz a lot today.
That's something
they don't know it, but it's coming. And there could be some other things that they do where the offense has big advantage in a certain day too. So those are things you always try to keep in mind when you're watching scrimmages.
Because obviously they can't say that in the media, but that happens at every football practice or any type of practice of any sport.
Yes.
Now, talking about the Big Ten now in general, obviously football, they're getting the big expansion. We did mention it a little bit, but how do you think those teams will fare?
Well, I mean, obviously with Oregon, they've been really good for a while. Washington got in the playoff.
Washington's going to be the interesting one.
They'll be an interesting one. USC is the glamour program, but they never made the playoff. The teams in the Pac-12 that made
Williams.
it. Yeah, and they are. The teams in the Pac-12 that made the playoff were Oregon and Washington, but it's still USC.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
they're gonna, Lincoln Riley is a great offensive line.
Yeah.
UCLA, they're going through a coaching change out there. It's gonna be a challenge for everybody, but particularly for those schools, because when USC plays UCLA, that's an easy one. Otherwise,
when they go to one of these, I don't know what their schedule's looking like, but whenever they play Penn State in a whiteout game, that's
well, and it's a long ride. It's just that they're gonna be in cold environments.
Yeah, conditions are completely different from where they're.
Oregon will come to Madison in November, so it'll be a real challenge for those schools. There is some excitement to it, for sure. Like I said, a little bit ago, the home schedule for Wisconsin is really attractive, for the ticket buyer this season. But with football, basketball, it makes sense. I think with the Olympic sports, we're still trying to figure out how that's going to work. You're going to get the tennis team, you're going to get the soccer teams. They're going to go out there too. How is that all going to work? And we're all fascinated to see how that's going to go.
Yeah, and I think just a couple teams to point out, obviously Washington, they lose their coach to Alabama, which we will see here, so that will be definitely interesting without Nick Saban. And then Oregon losing Bo Nix, lost Troy Franklin, their best receiver. It's gonna be definitely interesting to see how these teams react, especially playing a new schedule, playing new teams.
Yeah, they do. I think those programs, really both of them, but maybe Oregon more so. They've been good for a while, so you get some momentum. Dan Lanning is a really good coach out there, so I'm just going to assume here that it's more of a reload.
Exactly. That's what I'm thinking too. Yeah. Because it's yes, both teams are losing potential first-round quarterbacks, losing great receivers, but it's kind of like the SEC almost with Bama, Georgia, and all of them. Yeah, they have down years, but they're reloading with transfers and recruits, 4 and 5 stars, and they're just going to be back again being the best teams in the country.
It'll be interesting. It'll be a lot of fun.
Yeah. So now, last question about Badgers in general. So Badgers, out of this new conference, have the 3rd highest recruiting out of the conference. What do you think? Do you think that's more of Luke Fickell in year 2 getting his guys, or do you think that has to do a lot with NIL?
Probably more the former than the latter, to be honest. I think every school wants to have a good, you want to have a good NIL number there. I don't think Wisconsin's matches up with the Ohio States and the Alabamas and the Georgias, all the predictables. I think what Luke is doing too is when he first got here, he talked about the radius being whatever it was, 250 miles, whatever. He's expanded that because he's talked about, the W means a lot, not just Wisconsin, Illinois, Minnesota. It stretches, a little bit more coast to coast than maybe what he thought when he first got here. So I think that's a part of it. I don't get too wound up about recruiting rankings. On the one hand, I don't, but on the other, if you look at the teams that are, in that Final Four, the ones whose recruiting classes are very, very high.
Or they're getting extremely good guys out of transfer portal. The 2 quarterbacks that we mentioned earlier, both transfers.
Yeah, Wisconsin's made a pretty good living through the years of getting those unheralded guys, and through player development, they've been able to shine. But now in the world of the portal, you want to get the guys who are here from their freshman year to their senior year, but the reality is, with the portal, sometimes you're bringing in guys for 1 year, 2 years, and you've got to find the right fits who check all the boxes athletically as well.
So now switching over to just talking about you, because this is the Matt Lepay interview. So what are some of your favorite things to do outside of doing broadcasting or sports or podcasts?
try to get away from sports, to be honest with you. We have a little cabin up in the northern part of Wisconsin. We try to go up there when we can, especially in the spring and summer, and just relax. We have friends up there we get together with. I'm a really terrible golfer, but I'll play just enough to not get better. Try to catch up on reading and not just player bios. I mean, just either fiction, nonfiction, doesn't matter. Try to stay in halfway decent shape, work out and run, walk, that type of thing. But yeah, when we get, April there are no games necessarily, but there are still functions that I'm a part of. But when we get to that second week in May or so, it's pretty important for me to just escape a little bit. And
for sure.
just get away from the world of Badger athletics for a few weeks anyway.
Yeah. Now, could you care to talk about the Alzheimer's research that you've been doing for the UW? I've been reading that that's been something that you've been an advocate for many years.
Yeah, my mom passed away 7 years ago. She had Alzheimer's, so it's I think when people get involved in initiatives, it's generally personal in nature, and for me that was definitely the case. And connected with Steve Ramey from development from the UW Foundation, beg your pardon, who works closely with the initiative to end Alzheimer's at UW-Madison. A lot of brilliant doctors and researchers that are trying to find ways to slow the progress. I mean, everybody wants to find a way to cure it, but at least slow the progression. And if there are ways where we can help in fundraising events, public service announcements, those are the kind of things that I think it's important, if I have a platform here, to use it for something other than describing touchdowns, dunks, and all of that. So that's been that's been a near and dear with the UW, with what they do there, and then the Wisconsin Alzheimer's Association through the Walk to End Alzheimer's. It's just anything to raise awareness. The thing that I found out with this is that we didn't have to go very far before we found other people we know who were dealing with the same thing with their mom, dad, whoever. And it's one of the leading causes of death in our country right now. So anything that we can do to maybe give some hope to people who are dealing with this, maybe one day find a way to prevent it from happening at all.
So the last question of the interview I wanted to ask was, now you've been in the industry for a pretty good amount of time now.
Long time. Yes.
And someone as young as me, what can I do to try and get into the industry? And now this is for anyone, not just me. How does someone who's young that wants to get into sports journalism, how do they put their foot in the door?
Well, I think the best thing for you to do right now is to, in any way, any form or fashion, if you want to be on the air, get on the air. If there's a way for you to call high school games at La Folle, if you can, or if you have any kind of a radio club, any kind of broadcasting club, anything you can do where you're behind a microphone, do it. It's like, how do you get better at baseball? You take ground balls, you take batting practice. You don't just study someone, you actually get in there and do it. Be versatile. You say sports journalism, so reporting, writing, that's,
the whole field in general.
Just get as many repetitions as you can. Variety is important too. Be able to do different things. If you want to be a play-by-play announcer, do as much of that as you can, but if some of this involves writing, do that as well. Keep your writing skills as sharp as you possibly can. Interviews, you're ahead of the curve here. You listen, be a good listener, and it's one thing, you can have a list of questions down, but sometimes use that as your guideline, because the person you're interviewing may take you somewhere you didn't expect.
Just gotta go with the flow.
So you if you're listening to the answers, it could lead to the next question. You can get more in depth on a topic. But just do it. And then if your aspirations are college after that, after high school, get involved with the campus radio station. If you're studying journalism, get involved with that. With the Badger Herald, or whatever, anything that you can do to own your craft. take advantage of those opportunities. And then as you move through, you get closer to graduation, you start networking, and you put a little demo together, if it's a demo reel for broadcasting or writing samples, have that at the ready. Because what happens is a lot of times openings they're quick. You know, they don't, it's not, hey, give me a couple weeks, let me put something together. You want to have something at the ready for when that time comes.
I think that's why it was also so important for me to try to get this interview with you, because it's like, you know, what you said is like building a resume, right? And it's like, you know, having this on your resume is pretty nice, and then you can keep going and get more interviews, or, you know, more writings about different announcers, or even just sports journalism as a whole.
Yeah, the main thing too, and I always tell people this, tell young broadcasters this, one of the best things that you can do, one of the top priorities is to be a good teammate. Because one of the things, like in this line of work, if I left today, there would be 200 people applying for the job. And you know, first impressions can be deceiving, but in an interview process, first impressions are important. You know, come off well in an interview. Prove that you can be someone who can accept some criticism. And understand that, particularly if you're a team announcer, you're on a lot. Even when you're not on the air, you're on. So if you're not a lot of fun to be around, or if you're like the class jerk, I'll go to the next person because I have options. So that's an important, like, be an energy giver, not an energy sucker. One of those, because the competition for these jobs, it's pretty fierce. But having said that, don't let a rejection ruin you. I've been let go in a job before. You know, you're going to take some hits, but if you stay positive, if you're easy to be around, easy to work with, and you are determined to make it, then you will. A lot of people in this business, they think they want to get into it, but they realize there's not a whole lot of money in it at first, and like, I don't think I want to do this. They go do something else. Those who kind of push through all that, you'll end up being fine.
Yeah, and it's like as a business, it's like you start at, you know, whatever level, and then you finally, like, after, you know, years, or it could even be longer than that, you hit the next level, and you're like, you know, it's
whatever level you're on, though, you want to make it seem like it's the best job in the world.
Exactly.
Like, don't go into small town America and tell everybody, well, I'm only going to be here 6 months. They don't want to hear that. They want you're here. You're in Rhinelander right now, or you're in La Crosse right now. Make that seem like the most important place in the world. And you don't have to be at ESPN or Fox to be a success. I mean, if you can get there, great. If that's what you want to do. But I know people who are in the Madison, Wisconsins, or the, you know, Wassaws of the world, and they love it. They're perfectly happy doing that. And you have to understand too that this is, you know, it's a great life. Don't get me wrong, but it's holidays, you're working. Weekends, you're working. You know, your friends may be getting together to do something really fun, but you got a game, or you have a story that you're working on. So you have to not just understand it, but accept it. If you end up with a significant other, it's going to be the same thing. That person's going to need to understand and accept that your schedule is going to be a little bit different than someone who works 9 to 5, Monday through Friday, and weekends off. That's not what this business is.
Yeah, again, thank you for your time.
Absolutely.
And I appreciate the flexibility throughout, you know, all the emails and all that.
Yeah, no, glad we could do it. Glad, good luck to you.
Thank you.
Yeah, hope the rest of the school year goes well.
Thank you.
Continue. That's it. You did a really good job. So
thank you.
You're on a good path.
I appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Again, thank you for the opportunity.
No problem. Happy to do it.